If you're a high performer, recovery is a requirement, not a reward. If you've been under stress and pressure and you've felt that stress heavy on your shoulders lately, this is the perfect video for you to be watching or the perfect episode for you to be listening to. My name is Lindsay Pickowitz. I'm one of the head coaches and co-founders here at The Fitness Project, where we take burnt out professionals and transform them into fit, healthy leaders. Now, again, I know this might sound foreign, but if you're really working on your health and your well-being, rest and recovery is essential. Especially if you're a high performer, especially if you have to show up on your game every day. Because if you are trying to sustain peak performance without even thinking about how you can recover or reduce your stress, you are heading down the path of burnout. And today we're going to be talking about really the third element of physical mastery. There's 3 elements of physical mastery, which means you're optimizing your health. There is, of course, your movement and exercise. There is, of course, your nutrition and how you're fueling your body. But the third component is one that tends to be overlooked and undervalued, which is, as I mentioned, rest and recovery. Now, rest and recovery is essential because many times we lean into a place of burnout without even realizing it. Now, this is something that I would call the burnout loop. It's basically a painful cycle of unmet expectations. Follow along and let me know in the comments or on your review later if you really resonate with this. What we see with all of our high performers, and also what I've personally experienced as a high performer and a business owner myself, is as follows. We tend to have this assumption that we can just wake up and be on, and that we must just be on all the time. We almost think there's no other option. So then we end up stuck in this constant on button or cycle of performance where we're waking up, heading to work, taking care of family, going to sleep, and just repeat. That is expecting yourself to perform at a peak level every single day, at all times, with no rest. Now, if you keep doing that and you never really prioritize or understand how much stress that creates inside of your mind and body, well, then you're going to hit stage number 2, which is the fall. Now, the fall is when you've been performing at that level and you're really showing up full force consistently, it is inevitable that you will get to the point where you start to become more irritable. Just get more frustrated by things. It feels like your fuse is shorter. You start to maybe notice that you're waking up with dread, or you're pushing off going to sleep. Not necessarily because you hate your life or don't want to wake up tomorrow, but you start to almost dread getting into the workday or getting into the flow of the things that you say you really love. And then you start to find yourself procrastinating more often. Maybe you scroll more, or you start to avoid things that you know would probably be good for you. Procrastination takes root. And then you start to get into a habit of beating yourself up. It's almost like a self-loathing. Like, why are you pushing everything off? Why can't you just get your butt out of bed? Why can't you just XYZ? That's the fall. Those are the symptoms of the fall, which is stage 2 of this burnout loop. If you keep going through the fall and you never course correct, you never do some of the things we're going to talk about today, then you're going to hit stage 3, which is the energy crash. Before, the fall is a little bit more psychological than anything else and emotional. But when you hit the energy crash, that means you've been under stress for so long without proper recovery that now you're waking up exhausted, you're tired all day long, and then when you try to go to sleep, you can't because you're wired, and even when you do fall asleep, you're having a spike of energy around 2 to 3 a.m. Yes, that cortisol spike in the middle of the night. And you just feel like you're constantly under stress. And you know this because you're also almost on the edge every day, on the edge of tears. Like anything could set you off. You're just that touchy. That's when you've reached the energy crash zone. And then stage 4 is, again, if we do not correct this, if we don't turn back and right the ship and start prioritizing rest and recovery, then we're going to hit full-blown burnout. Burnout, I'm so sorry if you've experienced this, it is painful. And oftentimes this is how far it has to get before people wake up. Burnout is where you're barely making it through. Your to-do list just seems to keep getting longer, and your focus and your energy is at an all-time low. You might even reach the point of disease in your body. That's really where it's headed if you don't course correct and you don't learn and prioritize stress management, recovery. If we do really look at this burnout loop and we challenge it as the only way, well, then there's a whole new framework through which we can see performance. Now, again, the burnout loop only ends one way. If you don't course correct it, it's going to end in disease in the body, which is illness, disorder, chronic pain, psychological pain, anxiety, depression that are chronic. But if we do learn how to course correct, there's a brighter future ahead. Now, this was life-changing for me. I'll just share this for you before I talk about the sustainable performance reframe, this pendulum as I call it. But I have a performance coach myself, and I tend to be perhaps like you, where I expect a lot from myself, and if I'm not showing up at my best, or I start to procrastinate, or I start to kind of veer off track, it's really easy for me, or at least it was in the past, it was really easy for me to dip into a place of negative self-talk, self-loathing, just being mean to myself, which only made things worse. And I was having a conversation with my personal performance coach and telling him I was just really frustrated with myself and I just can't keep my energy up and I really want to be showing up at a higher level. And he goes, well, Lindsay, it sounds like you're kind of expecting yourself to be at Olympic performance level in your business all day, every day. And I was like, well, yeah, of course. And he goes, well, I mean, that's great, but are you actually recovering like an Olympic athlete? Are you actually recovering? Are you making time to restore yourself if you're going to be demanding that much of you? I thought about his question and I was like, well, like, I do meditation, I do some yoga, I do some other things, I work out, but I really thought about it and I went, I don't really feel restored ever. Like I kind of always feel like I'm in a little bit of a pressure cooker. And he's like, yeah, think about it in terms of the athlete. They go to the Olympics once, they perform and they challenge themselves every day, but they have a ton of recovery. Like Michael Phelps sleeping 8 to 12 hours, him going through intense workouts twice a day required a ton of recovery through his nourishment, nutrition, sleep, body work, right? If you're going to challenge yourself at that level, you've got to restore at that level. And that totally changed the way that I see performance. It's not just go, 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 challenge yourself, perform at a peak level, be on at all times. That doesn't make you great. What makes you great is being able to restore and have that energy and that renewal to then show up for the 10 seconds that are needed most or the 2 minutes that are needed most at a peak level, better than anybody else or better than you've ever been. Right? So the way that you want to see this and the way that I would encourage you to see rest and recover before we talk about how to do it is more like a pendulum than a loop. So a pendulum, you imagine that you pull it back. That is your time to prime yourself for peak performance. So you're getting ready. You let that ball go or that pendulum go and it swings into, with momentum, peak performance level, reaches all the way to the top, and then it comes back down and restores. Before you go back into priming yourself again, going into peak performance, hitting it hard, and then it falls again and restore. That pendulum will swing forever if you restore appropriately and you prime appropriately. That's really the reframe. That's how we want to see rest, recovery, and performance. Because the mindset shift here is recovery is not something to fit in when you can. I have a lot of clients who, when I have this conversation with them, they'll say, well, I definitely want to do that. I really enjoy having a full day to myself, but I really just, I can't really fit it in. Like, I want to make sure I have a clear day to be able to do this. And I look at them and I say, well, I mean, that would be awesome, but realistically, how often can you do that with where your business is at right now and where you're at schedule-wise, family-wise? And usually the answer is something like, oh, maybe once a month. I'm like, yeah, so you're going to spend 29 days in full force go stress mode and you're going to take one day to really restore yourself? Is that sustainable? And it's like, well, no. So I'd ask the same thing of you. Is the way that you're approaching rest and recovery really sustainable? Whether it's once a week, once a month, once a quarter. Maybe not. And if you do hear this and think, well, what am I supposed to do, Lindsay? I can't go get a massage every day. It's okay. Right now, we're still in the mindset shifting phase, which I promise is really important for you to actually apply, because many people will know what to do and not actually implement. We're going to break that pattern today. But the mindset shift is recovery is not something that you fit in when you can. It is a foundational principle for peak performance. Now, the real reason that recovery is a must is it's not just because you're pushing yourself and you're working hard and life is challenging or you're trying to hit new goals. Recovery is a must simply because stress exists. And stress, if we were to really define it, stress, again, it's subjective. Some people find certain situations more stressful than others, but just at a baseline so we can be on the same page, have the same definition. Stress is when the brain senses a disturbing stimulus and a cascade of events follows. When your brain perceives that there's a disturbance, there's some type of stimulus around you or internally, it sets off a cascade of events within your body. So a host of hormones are released, which increase your heart rate, your breath frequency, and release glucose so that you have energy to overcome the challenge. So it doesn't matter what that stress is, whether or not it's stressful to Sally Joe or to this other person over here. If your brain, you, perceive it as disturbing or stressful, then your body is going to have the same reaction. I want you to really get that, because sometimes people will look at your life and say, well, you handle it so well. And maybe you do, but if your body is having that same response over and over and over and over and over again, you're in the burnout loop, my friend, and you need to recover. Now, there's two different forms of stress, and I will say all stress is not the enemy. Cortisol is not the enemy by any means. There's two different forms of stress. There is acute stress, which we are fully equipped to handle. That's like a short-term, quick stressor that comes up, right? And your body releases those hormones. But then there's chronic stress. And chronic stress is long-lasting. So chronic stress is basically what happens when there's situations where that stressor is so overwhelming that it can't be resolved. And if that happens on repeat, then your body is going to go into a state of chronic stress. Now, look at this list and just see if any of it sounds familiar, okay? Your brain and body are under chronic stress when your immune system becomes suppressed. This is more of a symptom of chronic stress. So let's say that if you're getting sick all the time, right? Most likely that's partially because you're under chronic stress. Your brain will actually shrink. It will be harder to focus. It will be harder to get things done. Your memory will reduce. You'll have reduced neuroplasticity, which it means it's harder to learn. It's harder to adapt when things go wrong. It kind of takes you a long time to pivot. As I said, you can have your memory start to become impaired. It's harder to make decisions. You can get disease in the body, whether it's a chronic disease like an autoimmune disorder or some other type of disease in your body, whether it's elevated cholesterol or elevated blood pressure, even psychological and emotional challenges like depression, anxiety. These are all responses to chronic stress, meaning that there's stress present that we cannot resolve or we don't know how to resolve, therefore we don't. So the key point here that I want to make isn't to scare you about like how much stress you've been under or that your body's heading towards disease by any means. The key point is stress isn't the bad thing. Stress isn't the enemy, which is many times what we're told, like, oh, reduce your cortisol, reduce the stress, like stress. Stress isn't what kills you. It's the lack of recovery. It's the inability to process the stress that comes up that actually becomes the problem. So if you're a higher performer, you're always going to have stress. You're always going to have fires or things that come up that you don't expect, curveballs, right? Of course. But if you can properly prioritize your recovery, you might not need to reduce the stress in your life. Recovery is going to give you a greater capacity to tackle things on your plate without your brain perceiving that they're overly stressful. Now, here's where we're going to pivot into actions and behaviors, because there's a lot of, I will say, unproductive but seemingly harmless ways to reduce stress. Again, if you are someone who has awareness that you are living a very stressful life, high pressure, there's a lot going on, you tend to feel really stressed often, well, then you probably have built some coping mechanisms to manage the stress that are perhaps unproductive, even though they can seem harmless at the time. So let's talk about those so we can get those out of the way. The counterproductive ways that we tend to reduce stress are things like eating food, drinking alcohol. When we're under stress, it actually does not help us to eat a bunch of food. Because think about it, your body is now in a fight or flight response, which means that there's glucose being released in your body, your heart rate's going faster. Your body is not in the state to properly rest and digest your food. So if you just eat a bunch of food, it's actually going to produce more stress in your body most of the time. Alcohol, if you haven't heard this yet, alcohol is poison to your body. Your body perceives it as poison, which isn't a statement, it is a fact, because when your body is poisoned, it shuts off all other, we'll say, non-essential processes to get rid of the toxin or the poison that's come into your body. So regardless of how you spin it, regardless of if you've heard, oh, a glass of wine at night is healthy, your body perceives alcohol as a poison and a toxin, so it does increase stress within your body and inflammation. Counterproductive ways to reduce stress are also scrolling on social media. Because of the constant dopamine hit from social media, it actually keeps your brain in that sympathetic response, that stress state, which we'll talk about more later. But scrolling on social media, even though it can feel fun and like it's a release or relaxation, it's technically not. It actually produces more stress or keeps you in a state of being on. Third, unattainable expectation or poor boundary setting. Because a lot of times if you don't have attainable expectations of yourself, you're always going to feel like you are missing the mark, and you are always going to perceive that there's more stress than there actually is, simply because your expectations for yourself were too high. Like if I expect that I'm going to close 5 deals out of 5 opportunities today, but reality shows that I tend to close 3 deals out of 5 or 2 deals out of 5, whatever. Well, every time I get 4 deals or 3 deals, I'm going to perceive it as a loss. And that's simply unattainable expectation. Poor boundary setting. This comes into play where if you don't have proper boundaries, or you can't necessarily, if you don't feel like you can set them, maybe with your family or with your friends or with your colleagues, then you're going to feel overextended at all times, especially if you have a habit of overcommitting. If you don't like to let people down, if you have this belief that you are letting people down, if you set boundaries, or you're going to lose people if you set boundaries, then again, you're going to produce more stress in your body simply because that means you're going to overcommit yourself, okay? Fourth, if you repress emotions. Now, for a lot of people who are high performers, they won't let the world see how they're actually feeling, but inside they are screaming. Okay, if that's you, again, I feel for you, I understand. But if we repress emotions, or we try to numb them or pretend that they don't exist, again, it actually produces more stress in your body than if you were to fully feel that emotion and learn how to move through it efficiently. Emotions actually only have a 90-second lifespan, but we press them down as if they have so much power and like they're Pandora's box if we release them. If you learn how to actually process emotions, it can be a very sustainable, effective system, if you will, for lack of a better way to put it. Then lastly, unproductive or counterproductive ways to manage stress or reduce stress are to disconnect. So many times you may have noticed this for yourself. When you've been overstimulated or on all day long, you really want to retract. You want to disappear. You want to hide. You want to pull back because you've been so overstimulated. But disconnecting or withdrawing from yourself, from other people, from nature can actually become more stressful, because what we tend to do when we disconnect and withdraw is usually we go to one of the other behaviors on the list. Like we do mind-numbing activities like scrolling or watching TV or having a glass of alcohol or whatever. And we don't actually properly recover, even though it feels like it's what we need. So these are the counterproductive ways to reduce stress. But if you tend to go to those things, you might be wondering, well, what can I do instead, Lindsay? I will tell you. Before we talk about what you can do instead, I would challenge you to just do a quick stress audit. There's going to be questions on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. If not, I'll just read them out. And just think about this for a moment, because we want to know how we can properly tackle the stress in your life. But if we don't really look face to face at the stress, it'll be harder to tackle. So the first question just to consider is, what are your greatest daily stressors? Yeah. There's going to be a first answer. That's probably accurate. But then what are the second, third, and fourth answers? What are your greatest daily stressors? Second, what do you tend to do to manage that stress or recover from stress on a daily basis? Is there anything that you intentionally do? Is there anything that you unintentionally do that you've kind of just defaulted into? Do you get out of work and just go raid the snack cabinet, right? Or do you clock out for the day really late and then immediately turn to a glass of wine so you can fall asleep? What are the ways that you process or manage stress? And third, what have been or what are the consequences to how you're managing stress? Why is improvement a must? Said differently, why do we have to change how we're doing this? Reasons come first, answers come second. If you have enough reasons to change, it's going to be much easier to implement some of these new things. Maybe the consequences for you have been your energy is just trash. Maybe the consequences are you're kind of exploding on the people that you love. Like you're holding it together at work, but you're either exploding or disconnected from your family or your kids. Maybe the consequences have been you've gained weight and you don't feel good about yourself, right? What are the actual consequences to managing stress the way that you are? I'm going to give you the solutions, but you have to know why you need to change first. So now, here's the question. What is proper recovery? What is proper recovery? Well, in order to understand what proper recovery is, you need to understand what it is in your body, because then it can't be argued. It's factual. It's not just what Lindsay thinks helps her recover, right? It's what's actual recovery. True recovery happens when your body shifts from a sympathetic state, which basically means your nervous system is turned on, it's alert, and it's ready to attack or overcome a challenge, to what's called a parasympathetic state, which is essentially your rest and digest state. Now, what you'll see on the screen on YouTube, which again, if you aren't on YouTube, it's okay, I'm going to read this off to you. Feel free to follow us or subscribe on YouTube. But if you are on YouTube, you'll see on the screen the difference between parasympathetic and sympathetic. So essentially, when your body's in a sympathetic state, there are different reactions and different changes that happen in your body. So basically, when you're in sympathetic, which means that like stress response, you're ready to go and get after things, your pupils will dilate so that you can see more and be more alert. You will start to actually reduce salivation, so you won't salivate as much. Your heart rate will start to increase so that you're pumping more blood through your body. Your lungs actually relax so that you can get more oxygen into your lungs. You won't have your stomach active. Your stomach systems will be shutting down so that energy can be used elsewhere. Same with your gallbladder, same with your intestines, so basically your whole digestive tract. And then your body will also secrete what's called epinephrine and norepinephrine, so hormones and chemicals that will get you more alert and ready to go. And then your bladder will also relax, which is really interesting. On the alternative side, when you're in a parasympathetic state, so what we're going to link back to is we're going to go through activities or behaviors that help your body shift to this parasympathetic state. Parasympathetic, your pupils constrict, you have more saliva, very fascinating, your heartbeat slows down, your airways constrict a bit. Doesn't mean you can't breathe deep, it's just not as much oxygen pumping through your body. Your stomach is active, gallbladder, intestines, and your bladder is more contracted or controlled. Super duper interesting, isn't it? Two different states that your body is shifting into at all times. How amazing, by the way. We don't choose these things. They happen. It's amazing. So now what do we do? Well, if we want to shift into that parasympathetic state, we need to have some options, right? Because most of the time we've built habits that we perceive reduce our stress that actually don't. And so if we're going to make changes, we need to have a menu of ways that we can get healthy stress reduction or healthy recovery. So there's 3 different dimensions of recovery. There is physical recovery, there is psychological recovery, and then there's emotional or spiritual recovery. So let's start with physical recovery, because this tends to be the easiest. And again, many times most overlooked. Physical recovery, first and foremost, in all caps, is sleep. If you are not getting 7 hours of sleep, 7 to 9 hours, then you will absolutely want to prioritize that, if at all possible. I totally understand if you're in a season of life where you have little kids, you will recover, it will be okay, you will get back to sleep, but for now, do what you can, and then use some of the other ways. Hydration, simple way to increase physical recovery, so get half of your body weight in ounces. Gentle movement, gentle movement, yoga, stretching, walking. Nutrition is a great way to recover physically, but more so it's nutrition in the sense of eating calm foods. So calm inducing foods, those are going to be things that are water dense. Think fruit is more dense than a tortilla, like an apple has more water than a tortilla, for example. So water dense, fiber rich, micronutrient rich foods. Minimal caffeine. Caffeine's going to send your body into more of an alert state naturally, right? Heart rate increases, you get warmer, etc. So no caffeine or minimal caffeine, removing alcohol. These all, just doing less of those things also helps your body physically recover. And then there's also nervous system regulation. This is a little bit more advanced once you get past the basics. This is something I've found life-changing and I implement with a lot of my clients and our clients at the Fitness Project as well. Things like breath work, NSDR, if you've never heard of this, game changer, especially if you don't have a lot of time in a day to recover. NSDR, which is non-sleep deep rest, even for 10 minutes, replenishes your dopamine up to 65% and restores your focus. So even you can just look up on YouTube, NSDR 10 minutes. Yoga Nidra is also very similar to NSDR. It's pretty much the same thing, slightly different focus, but massive game changer, just a simple activity that can totally reduce your stress physically. Time in nature and meditation are also great ways to regulate your nervous system so that you're not in fight or flight over little things. Like if you've become very irritable and touchy, doing some of these practices is really going to help you double down and regulate your nervous system beyond the basics. Okay, now just small changes here, because those are lots of different options, but small changes. 7 to 9 hours of sleep, I know I mentioned that already, but it reduces emotional reactivity up to 60%, and it improves your decision making. That was from a study from UC Berkeley. 10 minutes of walking. Again, little changes, big impact, friends. 10 minutes of walking reduces cortisol up to 18%, just from the ADA, a study in 2020. NSDR, as I said, replenishes dopamine up to 65%, which was actually a study done by the Huberman Lab, if you know and love Andrew Huberman like we do. Meditation reduces the activity in the brain's default mode network, which is basically responsible for rumination and anxiety. So meditation, even 10 minutes a day, reduces your cortisol up to 32% and basically calms the part of the brain that ends up, if it's overstimulated, in rumination and anxiety. That's a study from Harvard in 2011. So really small changes make a huge impact. They're studied, they're well-researched and documented. So if you feel like, oh, these things are a waste of time or they don't really work for me, give it another go, because with time, these changes will compound in your brain, in your body, will be undeniable if you can mentally give yourself the chance. And now this is just physical recovery, so let's keep chatting. Psychological recovery. Think about it. If you are on at all times, we are no longer mostly farmers out in nature doing physical labor. Our work is mentally taxing, right? We are looking at screens, we are solving problems, we are answering emails, we are taking phone calls, we are sending text messages. We are doing so much mental work that we actually need mental recovery. Now, how do you get mental recovery? Quite simply put, it's the opposite of what you're doing to yourself all day long, right? And what I'm doing to myself all day long. So to get psychological recovery, you can reduce digital noise or inputs. So think about even this that you're listening to right now, this is an input. You're listening to something and maybe watching something, you're inputting information. So if you want to psychologically recover, and we will tell this to clients all the time, sometimes it's really nice to just turn off the podcast. Like, just reduce the noise. Now, right now you're in a learning mode, so don't turn me off if this is really helpful. But when you're really thinking of recovery and rest, turning down the digital noise, maybe just soft music or instrumental is better than a full-blown podcast or the news where you're listening to something, right? So reduce the digital noise. And then another really important coping skill or stress reducer, recovery, however you'd like to put it, is to learn to detach from stress mentally. Now, the law of detachment is one of the spiritual laws of success, but law of detachment is something that we so rarely master because, I'll just be frank, we love to have control or perceive that we have control. But if we can detach from work, from our problems, then we actually have the opportunity to boost our cognitive function. So think about it. If you take all the stress from work with you, and you ruminate on it, and you try to think about it, and you problem solve, and you try to work through all the different things in your head, you're not actually recovering psychologically. And even though physically you're doing things, your brain is still active. And then you wake up the next day already tired or feeling dread, even though you maybe, quote, did all the right things. Learning to detach or compartmentalize is essential for recovery. It's essential for mental health. And if you don't know how to do it, or you struggle with it, it's not that you can't, it's that you haven't learned how yet. It is a skill to develop, just like learning a language. So again, if you're resting, quote unquote, but you're ruminating, you're not actually recovering. So you have to learn how to disconnect from your thoughts, which actually can come through some of the other practices I mentioned. There is basically a mindfulness exercise that I love and taught me how to reduce rumination, which is basically, very simply, it was a visualization with eyes closed where you see clouds in the sky, and every thought that pops in while you are attempting to meditate basically goes into a cloud and then floats away. Similarly, you can imagine looking at a river with leaves floating through it. Every time a thought comes up, it sits on a leaf and then floats away. Or one of my favorites is sitting at a bus stop. There's cars going by, and every time a thought comes up, I put it on the side of a car and it drives away. Simple mindfulness practice, but makes a world of difference. Now, lastly, there's emotional recovery, because who knows when you've been under stress and it's not just work stress or a problem you can't solve or a deal that didn't close or you've been outside running around for 20,000 steps or whatever, you can still feel tired. You can feel tired, exhausted even. That's emotional stress. Okay, so you need emotional recovery. Your soul can be tired. That's a very real thing. But how do you reflect from that? How do you recharge from that? The first thing that you're going to really practice is basically learning how to name and accept emotions. So I talked about earlier how suppressing emotions does not help. It actually produces more stress and disease in the body. So learning how to not suppress is first being able to name and then accept an emotion. I teach this as a whole separate category that has its own hour-long workshop. But learning how to name and accept emotions is as simple as being able to see an emotions wheel or name the emotion you're feeling right now, and then being able to say, it's okay that I feel that right now. It's okay. Many times we'll feel a certain way, but we'll hate that we're feeling that way. And so we'll shove it away, put it in a box, not want to open it because of whatever that emotion means. Well, I'm upset, therefore it means that that person had control over me or whatever, right? We build all these stories. But if we can learn how to name and accept emotions just as they are, we actually can move through them and process them healthily. Journaling and reflection is also a fantastic way to recover emotionally. I use this one a lot personally, which can really build self-awareness. You can't change what you're not aware of, so sometimes you actually have to do a lot of self-reflection to understand yourself a little bit better, and then you can move forward with a healthy relationship with self. You can also find meaning in challenges through journaling and reflection, and also learn how to separate yourself from your thoughts. Many times, one practice I will have clients do is just start journaling, but what I mean by journaling is write down all the thoughts in your head. So you might wake up one day and be kind of stressed out and then take a pen to paper and go, right now, today, I am feeling anxious. And the thoughts going through my head are, quote, I have so much to do. Quote, I don't know how I'm going to get it done. Quote, well, what about my husband? Or what about this? And they just write down their thoughts. And just by putting it on paper, there is immediately now a degree of separation. They can see their thoughts. They're not completely consumed by them. Try that practice out if it serves you. Another great one for emotional recovery is actually just talking to people, like confidants, talking to your support system. Now, I know it sounds simple to some, but to others, maybe who are like me, when I'm really actually struggling emotionally, it is hard for me to make a phone call because I don't want to just call somebody to cry, or I don't want to just call somebody to freak out. Like I perceive it, and in the past I have perceived it as unproductive, maybe a burden for them, like I don't know what they're going through. But the truth is, it's really essential for emotional recovery to be able to talk to somebody, even if it's one or two people, even if it's a therapist or a coach or someone in your life. To be able to just speak out loud what you're experiencing reduces feelings of isolation, which, if not handled, lead down the route to feeling low, depressed, desperate even. And that's not a good place to be. So even just talking to somebody is actually really beneficial for your recovery. And then prayer and connection to some type of higher purpose. Emotional, spiritual recovery. And of course, those are two different ways you can get it regardless of your faith or your religion. So those, in summary, are your 3 different forms of recovery. You can, like I said, a full menu: physical recovery, psychological recovery, emotional recovery. Take your pick and start testing. But there's a really important note I want to give you, because I just gave you a lot of options, but it doesn't mean you need to use all of these. Important: recovery does not have to be complex. It doesn't have to be complex. You don't have to do a 2-hour routine. It can be really, really simple. Here are some simple swaps you could make that would give you a greater sense of recovery on a daily basis. Daily basis. Again, you don't need a whole day for this. You don't need to go get a massage and a spa day and blah, 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 blah. That's great when you can do it. But if you're busy like me, you're not going to go do that every week or every day, right? So simple swaps: instead of coffee and scrolling when you wake up, immediately wake up, drink some water, and do 10 minutes of movement. Simple swap. Much healthier. You're going to get recovery from the moment you wake up. And most importantly, you're not going to be sent into a state of dopamine firing and cortisol shooting through the roof. You're going to feel calm as you start your day. Second, instead of task hopping all day long, which is what I would actually accurately call task hopping instead of multitasking. There is no such thing as multitasking, because you're only getting part of your attention for all the things, which is very ineffective. You're task hopping all day long, it actually is making your brain work even harder to get less done. Instead, focus on the highest ROI activities. The things that are going to have the highest return, the ones that are actually going to move the needle, the ones that are actually going to produce an outcome. That alone is stress reducing, because you get to the end of the day and you feel accomplished, right? You don't take work with you. It's a ripple effect. And then third example of a simple swap is, instead of having a drink to relax at night or after work, go for a slow walk after work. Slow walk. If you're a power walker, I know that's going to be challenging. But if you go for a slow walk after work, you are telling your brain and your body that you're safe. You're not running away from anything. You are okay. And it actually will reduce stress physically and psychologically. So simple swaps, it can be easy. And if you are in a position of leadership and you are a high performer, your priorities, hear me on this, for rest and recovery are as follows. Number 1, absolute priority is sleep, 7 to 9 hours a night. If you can make that happen, that is numero uno. Nothing else is as effective as getting sleep, if you can. Second is nourish yourself. Now this is, again, really simple, and we tend to overlook it. If you're doing all the other stuff, but you're eating, your entire diet is processed inflammatory foods, you are still going to be gaining weight, feeling puffy, feeling bloated, feeling tired, simply because the fuel that you're giving this engine, this body of yours, is not actually healthy, right? So nourish yourself is number 2 priority. And then third, move daily for at least 10 minutes. If you can get up and go for more little movement snacks, as one of the coaches on our staff calls it, then great, even better. But move daily. If you're not already sleeping, nourishing yourself appropriately, or moving your body for at least 10 minutes a day, those are your first 3. Don't even look at the rest of the list yet. And then big thing that I would say is do less. This is mine. Do less. When you tell yourself that you're a better person or a more effective business owner, if you can accomplish more tasks, you are setting yourself up for a life of stress and pain and probably feeling like a failure. However, if you can learn how to do less and accomplish more, you will really feel like a winner. And I can speak from personal experience that that is true. So do less, consume less, meaning inputs, consume less information, and you will feel much better. You'll feel more well-rested, restored, and you'll be able to recover and perform at a high level, because that's what this is all about. It's not just being able to enjoy rest, which is lovely when you get there. It's more about sustainability of that high performance. So now just a quick recovery reset. Again, if you are listening to this, then just kind of do a mental audit as I ask you these questions. If you are on YouTube, you are welcome to pause this or take physical notes, which I always encourage when you have a moment to do so. But just think for a moment. When we're talking about recovery, it's like, where can you start to input recovery? Well, number 1, which is my first question for you, is your morning routine. So what is your current morning routine? How do you set yourself up for a successful day? Like, what's the first few things you do with the first 30 minutes of your day? For me, I wake up, I feed my dog. I will say, at times gotten into a poor habit of waking up and checking my phone or checking my messages, checking my social media, whatever. But realistically, I wake up, I take care of my dog, and then I immediately go into some form of movement after I drink water. So it goes water, feed my dog, go into movement, either yoga or a walk, and then I do a meditation. That is my morning. What is your current morning routine? How do you set yourself up for success? Don't necessarily compare yourself to me. I'm just giving you an example. Second place where you can start to input some more recovery is your evening routine. You could consider this maybe your transition out of work into home life, or you could consider this your sleep routine. Like the last hour before you go to bed, or the last 30 minutes before you go to bed or fall asleep. You can think of it either way. But what's your current evening routine? How do you come down from the stress of the day? Currently, just audit it and then see, is there some improvement to make? The third question to ask yourself is very action-oriented. What is one small commitment that will help you better manage stress and recover? I gave you at least 25 different examples throughout this podcast. Find one small commitment that will help you better manage stress and recover. And remember, in closing, recovery is a requirement. It is not a reward. You do not have to earn recovery. You do not have to work or hit a particular revenue goal in order to recover and rest. It is a must if you want to keep performing at the level that will allow you to hit those big goals. In closing, I hope that this has been helpful. I hope it's been eye-opening. And now you see that there's a lot of different ways that you can reduce stress in your life. And many of them actually have nothing to do with the stress itself, the things outside of your control. It has more to do with your ability and choice to prioritize your recovery. Stress isn't what kills you. A lack of recovery is. So take care of yourself, rest and recover, and you're going to find yourself in that beautiful, sustainable, peak performance pendulum where you're priming yourself for your day, you're killing it, getting outcomes accomplished, and then restoring yourself and feeling completely recharged. And being able to do that every day, every week, every month, every quarter for the rest of your working life so that you really have a full, joyful, beautiful life of giving and contribution and whatever else is important to you. My name is Lindsay Pickowitz. Again, I'm one of the head coaches and co-founders here at The Fitness Project. If you need any support, please feel free to click one of the beautiful buttons below, book a call with us, leave a comment, ask a question. We are more than happy to support you in any way, shape, or form we can, and make sure that you subscribe to this podcast, to this channel, and that way we can continue to serve you in this format. That said, take this information, go out and conquer your day. Cheers.